cultivation of these 7 moods. So the Bodhichitta chitta means heart or mind, and Bodhi is awakening. So the Bodhichitta is the heart or mind of a Buddha or Bodhisattva. And yeah, it's a particular state. The arising of the Bodhichitta it's what makes one a Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva is someone who cares deeply about alleviating the suffering of all beings, not just enlightenment for themselves, but enlightenment for all beings. So the puja is a Bodhisattva practice, it's a Bodhichitta practice. And these 7 stages create the conditions for the arising of that state, that heart of a Bodhisattva. So it's an important practice in itself, but there are also attitudes that we need to cultivate in our daily life. So we've looked at the stage of worship, the stage of salutation, going for refuge, and last week we looked at confession, the stage of confession, the Sangha Gita. So this evening we move on to the stage of rejoicing, which is I think the 5th section of the puja. So I'm going to introduce the stage of the puja and this attitude of rejoicing. But then we're also going to hear from 2 Sangha members, Pretti and Dayaloka, who are going to give personal talks about their experience of rejoicing, perhaps, but also I'm hoping that they will rejoice, or going to hear them, or hear it practiced, or hear people rejoice. Pretti and Dayaloka. So we've had all these stages. We've been through these stages in the puja. We've just had the stage of confession last week, where we've acknowledged our faults and let go of them, so we can move on. And we move then to rejoicing, the stage of rejoicing in merits, or rejoicing. And it's a really crucial stage that comes next, and for a number of reasons. But the first one is it's really important to have positive emotion. This positive emotion, rejoicing, really is uplifting. I'm sure you've done it before, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it this evening. To rejoice is uplifting. We're lifted out of our usual state into a higher state. It's uplifting. It connects us with positive emotion. Also, I would say that rejoicing is the beginnings. It's kind of the beginning of the Bodhisattva's heart, the Bodhisattva's mind, the wisdom of a Bodhisattva, because it starts through rejoicing in other people in particular. We're no longer just identifying with ourselves and our own qualities and our own merits. We're starting to identify with other people. We're starting to be concerned about other people. And there's the analogy Vadanya often uses is about supporting a team. And we're no longer, it's like anybody can score in that team, and you're glad. It doesn't have to be just about you scoring the goal. So you get a sense of that in the Sangha, where we're just glad if somebody makes progress. We're glad if somebody becomes a mitra or is invited for ordination, or somebody makes a breakthrough in their Dharma life. We become glad. It doesn't have to be about me and my progress. And you get the sense of, your identity starts to become bigger. It's not just, you feel part of something bigger. It's not just about a small self-obsessed identity. So for me, this attitude of rejoicing starts to open us up. We start to become concerned with and identify with other people, not just ourselves. So it's the seeds of wisdom, I think. It's the seeds of the mind of a Bodhisattva and the heart of a Bodhisattva. So in the verses, I'll just read out the verses from the Puja book to give you a flavour of that section, rejoicing in merit. I rejoice with delight in the good done by all beings, through which they obtain rest with the end of suffering. May those who have suffered be happy. I rejoice in the release of beings from the sufferings of the rounds of existence. I rejoice in the nature of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha who are protectors. I rejoice in the arising of the will to enlightenment. That's a translation of Bodhichitta. And the teaching, those oceans that bring happiness to all beings and are the abode of welfare of all beings. So in these verses of the puja, it begins by just taking delight in anybody's good deeds, any good that any beings do. It's not just our own ethics, which is maybe in the fourth section, confession, we're focusing on our own ethics and maybe the unskillful deeds we do. In this section, we're focusing on good deeds not just our own good deeds, but anybody's good deeds. And we're pleased about that. Not just pleased, but we rejoice in that. We take delight in that. And it's not just for the act in itself, but it releases them from suffering. It brings in this kind of perspective of karma and the Dharma that, you know, through skillful action, we're liberated from suffering. And then there's just this really lovely refrain, may those who have suffered be happy. It's just an exclamation almost. I really like saying that verse in the puja, may those who have suffered be happy. It's just a real wish for people's happiness. And it's really what I'd say with all the sections of the puja, try and cultivate that emotion while you're chanting it. And I think with this one, it's really lovely to chant this section with a sense of delight and joy and really feeling what you're saying. And then rejoicing in the release of beings from the sufferings of rounds of existence. And this is the idea of we just go round and round repeating the same suffering, and rejoicing beings being released from that through their Dharma practice. And then it gets broader than that, and you start to align yourself more with the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, with the three jewels, with reality. So again, this is a practice, yes, paving the way for the wisdom of a Bodhisattva, but you're rejoicing in the nature of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, who are protectors, rejoicing in the arising of the Bodhichitta and the Dharma. And in the verses, they're described as oceans that bring happiness to all beings. So that's a lovely image to dwell on, an ocean, which is kind of we don't know the limit of it. It's just vast and deep. So the Bodhichitta and the Dharma are like oceans that bring happiness to all beings and are an abode of welfare of all beings. So that's a section from the puja that we chant and recite in the puja. And again, try not to do that any of the sections mechanically, but particularly this one. Do it, if you can, do it with a sense of delight and joy. Okay, so how am I doing for time? Because I wasn't keeping a tracker. A few more minutes, great. So, yeah, so there's the puja and the attitude of puja, which I think it's important that we've focused on our own faults, but that can get a bit heavy. And if we're not careful, if we only focus on the negative, which we often do in our society, we end up with negative emotion. So we're focusing on faults, and that can be a bit slightly deflating, like, oh, you know, all these faults I've got. So it's really important to balance that out with focusing on our own good qualities and the good that there is in the world, because we're bombarded with messages about the bad that is in the world and the suffering, and, you know, our news is full of that. So we can't just expect to be in positive emotion when a lot of our input is so negative. So we need to really cultivate that. We need to put energy and effort and discipline into cultivating a positive mind, a joyful mind, and focusing on the things that we can take delight in. Because that gives us the capacity to hold the difficulties and to hold maybe turn our mind towards the truths, which come later in the puja when we start to look at the wisdom in the next section of the puja. So the positive mind is a basis for truth and to counteract this tendency of our mind to focus on the negative and find fault, which is kind of fed by the media and the society that we live in. So we need a practice. We have a practice where we deliberately, consciously try and train our eyes, try and train our heart to see the good in other people, to see the good in ourselves, see the good in other people in the world, and not just see it, but name it, speak it, rejoice in it. And so we have this practice of rejoicing in other people, rejoicing in their merits. We had the Mitra ceremonies a couple of weeks ago, and that's, it's wonderful to hear. Yeah, absolutely wonderful to hear people rejoiced in by family members, by friends, by Sangha members. And you get the sense of their qualities as individuals, but also you get a sense of kind of love from the person who's doing the rejoicing of the other person. It really is an aspect of metta. So we'll be doing a metta bhavana later, and we'll be bringing that into our metta bhavana practice. So so don't just expect yourselves to be in positive states without actively cultivating that. We need to deliberately train our mind and our heart to take delight in the good that's done by others. And when we do that, it starts to blur. It's the beginning of blurring the distinction between us and other people. It's moving away from gravitating around ourselves, being obsessed with ourselves, focused on ourselves, starting to open out and take delight in other people. And maybe I'll just end by talking about an experience recently of this, where I was on the Mitra conveners meeting at Padmaloka. And it's the first time that we've been able to meet in person for 18 months. And when somebody leaves the meeting, we rejoice in them. And there was an order member called Swadeepa, who had been a Mitra convener for 10 years in Ipswich, and he was passing it on to somebody that he'd ordained, which was really lovely. And I think, anyway, so yeah, so he was there, and we had a meal, and it was a special meal. Padmaloka gave us crisps, and they made us a cake, and we had fruit juice, so it felt like a special occasion. And then we sat around the fire at Padmaloka, and we just rejoiced in Swadeepa. And it was absolutely wonderful. It was so wonderful just to just spend the evening rejoicing in this one person. And it was one of those experiences where it didn't matter. It really felt like it didn't matter who we were rejoicing in. We were just all delighted in the atmosphere that got created. And there's just such a sense of love in the room and love for Swadeepa. He was very moved. We were all very moved. So it's just really delightful to do that. And there really was a sense of deep connection, I would say. I was going to, possibly a different experience of self and other, just the blurring of that. It just really didn't matter who was being rejoiced in. It was just the act of rejoicing, and appreciation and metta. So that was a recent experience of this. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to first Pretti and then Dayaloka, and they're going to speak to us about rejoicing, and hopefully we'll hear them rejoice a bit as well. And Paranita's going to wave at them when it's time, when it's 8 minutes and then 10 minutes. Okay, great.
Great, thanks. Hello. Yeah, so delightful to be able to talk about rejoicing this evening with you all. And I just wanted to start by saying, well, what is rejoicing? Rejoicing is this beautiful mix of giving joy, of gladdening, and of feeling great delight. So what a wonderful thing to do. So I reflected, first of all, on some of my experiences of rejoicing in others and of having been rejoiced in. And both ways, actually, the Vedana, or like the feeling tone I get when rejoicing or being rejoiced in, I would describe it as like a glowing purity. There's something really pure and beautiful about rejoicing. And when I rejoice in somebody, I'm relating to them through metta, like Bodhinaga was saying. Pure metta comes into play because what's happening is I'm seeing the best in them, and I'm naming that for the purpose of delight and for the purpose of growth. And when I've been rejoiced in, I really appreciate it. I appreciate it so much, because it's quite something that's when somebody cares so much about you that they're willing to take the time to express that to you, and to really witness to you, something about being seen when you're being rejoiced in. And yeah, the creme de la creme of rejoicing is Mitra ceremonies, quite rightly. There's a reason it's like the highlight of the Buddhist Center calendar. Just hearing rejoicing after rejoicing is just delightful. And I think especially when you have friends or family who haven't even been in the Buddhist Center before, and they stand on this stage and talk in front of so many people. It's such a bold thing to do. It's such a loving thing to do. And I think at most Mitra ceremonies, I hear somebody say, oh, they're quite taken by the whole thing. And normally you only hear this sort of thing at a funeral. And it's true. And I think, yeah, what a shame. It should be the fabric of our lives, rejoicing. It shouldn't just be reserved for funerals. And then to talk about rejoicing in the context of the sevenfold puja, which, Bodhinaga has already touched on, but I'll do it again because it's important, which is that, the point in the puja where we reach rejoicing, it's really significant in terms of the order of the folds. So 2 folds ago, we've gone for refuge. And that means, we've glimpsed something really sublime that we want to give ourselves to, that we want to go for refuge to. And we've expressed that. And then naturally what comes after that is, well, we're human and we're going to fall short of our ideals. So we're bound to hit up against our limiting behaviors, our unskillfulnesses. They're bound to then show themselves. And then within the puja context, we can confess those faults. We can name them. We can say, well, look, I want to let go of this and I want to be better. And then once you resolve to be better, rejoicing is just the flavor that then naturally arises. That's why it comes after confession. And I think it's because there's a real lightness and an ease that comes in after you've confessed. There's like a weight off your shoulders. And then there's an opportunity to turn your attention to all the good you do and all the good others do. And that blurring of boundaries that Bodhisattva talked about, so true, you can just see the good in the world then. And when you reflect on the good others do, you just tap into how interconnected we all are. And I think gratitude just ends up pouring out. I think that's the natural response for me, at least, when I look at rejoicing. So I've picked 3 lines from the rejoicing section of the puja that Bodhinaga read out. And then within those 3 lines, I'm just going to rejoice a bit more within them. So the first line's a classic. I rejoice with delight in the good done by all beings. So I can't help but want to rejoice in the centre team when I hear that phrase. So in Bodhinaga and Aryadasa and Satyajyoti, and Maitrivasan, who's just away on retreat at the moment, every single day, I really think they do so much good for the benefit of our Sangha, much more than you might realise. And they do whatever is needed for the benefit of us all. And that means incredibly long hours of work, doing things out of their comfort zone, keeping themselves inspired so they can then be creative and as kind as possible in all the situations they're in. And I just think it's a gorgeous thing. What a gift they give us running this centre. So thank you. And they're supported by the Hridaya team and by all these lovely teams of volunteers. And again, they give so abundantly so we can all benefit. So like on Sangha Day on Sunday, it was such a gorgeous day. I had such a gorgeous time with everybody. And so many people came in to play to make that happen. So it was such a well-planned event. These things don't just happen. They take so much planning, and the way it was executed was just wonderful, really well held. It was even made hybrid, which again, I think we can take it for granted, but it takes a lot of effort to do these things. So, we did that so as many people as possible could benefit. I was delighted to see that Vidya was there, even from India. He was joining in with Sangha Day, which I just think is such a lovely thing. We had this gorgeous shrine made by Sarah, Nigel, Kashanti Chara. Just like, again, you just walk in and it's just stunning. Like the environment it creates is amazing. And you do that regularly, so thank you. That's a beautiful thing. And then the choir, for weeks on end, the choir are practicing for the benefit of us under the kindly guidance of Sangha Gita and of joy. And like, if you got to see that, it was just gorgeous, just these like delightful beings just being like wonderful and singing for us all. And giving the blessings to us. Just think, God, it's just amazing, isn't it? And then so many beautiful Sangha members like Anna baked these delicious cakes for us all to eat, which is just amazing. So many talents in the Sangha. And then the reason for that, it just connected us in with India, because actually we did that so we could raise funds for Karuna in India, who do this amazing life-changing work to help people who really need it. So again, just like interconnectedness, in the heart of Sangha Day is amazing. And then we had our beautiful Sangha Day puja, this like powerful opportunity to, recommit to your vows or to your aspirations. And during the puja, we even brought food donations so we could benefit our local communities. It's just like benefit and beauty and good again and again and again. And we're so lucky because we have festivals all year long, don't we? So if you didn't get to come to Sangha Day, do not worry, there will be another festival soon. So the next line of the puja, well, it's not the next line, but the next line I've selected from that verse, from the verses of rejoicing. The one I've selected next is, I rejoice in the nature of the Bodhisattva. So a Bodhisattva, a being who gives for the happiness of all beings. And in the myth of our movement, we collectively as a Sangha, we act as a Bodhisattva. And a Bodhisattva doesn't pick and choose who should be able to benefit from kindness and from generosity. There's just supreme giving for everyone and for all. And in my eyes, the Sheffield Buddhist Centre acts as a Bodhisattva because we have this just deep, beautiful culture of giving and helping and generosity. And that's come about because we run on a Dharma economy. We don't formally charge anyone who would like to learn about the Dharma, who would like to learn to meditate. It's just open to everybody with open hands. And very few of the Buddhist centres run in this way because it's radical. It's an amazing thing that we're founded upon. And I think the culture of that just runs through to how we all act with one another. So anyone's welcome to come on our introductory courses. We don't let somebody not having, say, like disposable income be a barrier. We just let anybody come. And that's so important to me, that principle. And obviously there's big costs in running a centre of this size. So when Sangha members do decide to donate, well, that's awesome because we need it. We need it to make a difference. But the fact that we don't ask for it all the time, we don't, have a charge for each class we attend. It's such a rare thing that's discussed in the centre. I think that's just such an amazing thing. So I really rejoice in Vadanya and in Amoga Banksa and Atra and all the founding order members of the centre who believed in that principle of dharna and allowing the centre just to be this conduit of just real generosity. And the final line I'll talk about this evening is and the teaching, those oceans that bring happiness to all beings. So yeah, finally, that, you know, the deep and true Dharma teachings, yeah, they just fill me up with light. And I do believe they bring happiness to all beings. I was here last night on week 5 of one of our introductory courses. And I just think those introductory courses are this beautiful prime example for this, for witnessing the teachings, bringing happiness and changing lives of people who are first encountering them. And you just see week by week, you see people softening, you hear them talk about how they learned how to be kind to themselves for the first time, stories of how they've been less reactive because they've learned how to find the gap. All these stories you just hear, just like inspiration after inspiration. And it's one of the things I find the most heartwarming to witness is being involved in an intro course and seeing people. It's just a beautiful thing. So I rejoice in every person who's ever been brave enough to come on an introductory course and then has been bold enough to think, yes, I'm going to stick to this, I'm going to change so I can live a beautiful life. And that pretty much means all of us. So I do. Thanks.
Is the mic on? Ah, thank you. Oh, thanks, Pretti. That was lovely. This is like really heart growing with delight. What else was I going to say? So it's absolutely wonderful to be here and to kind of just rejoice, isn't it? This is what this section, this fold of the puja is about, is rejoicing. And I was feeling a little bit, as I coming up with Mahaprasara earlier, and I was feeling a little bit crappy. It wasn't Mahaprasara at all. It was something else. It was a work thing. It would never be Mahaprasara. It was so kind. And I just walked into the door and it just went, you know, just kind of the energy, the sort of collective practice over however many years the centre's been here, just sort of permeated, and I just could feel it. Wonderful. So I was going to start with start at the beginning, which is the opening line, and my favorite phrase, which is, I rejoice with delight, which is Pretti's. And it's kind of so rare, you know, it's when, you know, she said only at funerals do we rejoice or remember, but we rejoice with delight. And I was kind of just struck by Aryadasa on Sunday, I think it said, or 10.8 points, or 10.8 rejoicings. And it was everything from Sarah painting helping organize the painting of the center, to the tech team, to the center team, to the wonderful talks, to the remembrance garden, all these great things which happen here through the Sangha. So it's sadhu, everyone. And it just brings sympathetic joy, doesn't it? Immediate mudita just comes to mind. So, and the other thing that Bodhinaga just said, which was, your heart just lifts, doesn't it? It just lifts in this phase of the puja. So, and I think the other point about doing the puja is doing it together. You know, so on Sunday, I was on Zoom on Sunday, but I did feel this sort of lifting. I do it on my own. It's still quite strong. I'm still trying to bring to mind everyone, but doing it with everyone here is so important. So a few reflections I had, which was rejoicing in merit is something, this isn't new. This is the Buddha's radicalism, you know. Rejoicing in merit goes back to the Buddha. It permeates the suttas, it permeates his disciples, and they're rejoicing in each other. And I think it's the Etikavada Sutta, which is a kind of series of rejoicings, the Buddha rejoicing in the qualities of his closest followers. So, you know, the great wisdom of Sariputta, the psychic power of Moggallana, the life without conflict of Subhuti, the commitment to faith of Vikali, the brilliant speech of Kassapa, and the many rejoicings in Ananda, his closest follower, his closest disciple, you know, the very learned and loyal Ananda. So just these sort of wonder, you know, and these words he brings to mind sort of just shows this isn't just on a sort of mundane level. This is reaching those oceans of excellence that Pretti talked about. and that sort of release of suffering of all beings, our sort of deepest wish. I just wanted to give a few personal examples of kind of rejoicings. One's a very personal one, actually, and then the others are in the Sangha. So a few years ago, about 5 years ago, my mum was having quite major surgery. So mum at the time was 88 years old, and she was about to have heart surgery. And I wasn't going to be there. My sisters were going to be quite close by. And the night before, we had this sort of phone call. And we just rejoiced in each other. We just kind of, because we're pretty sure the operation would be okay. But mum was 88 and is quite elderly, and we didn't know. And we just rejoiced in each other's lives. And it was just the most beautiful thing. We didn't have there wasn't any kind of remorse, any regret. It was just, well, this is just a wonderful point. You know, it's just such a precious thing. The rejoicings in the Sangha, where to start? I think one of my burning memories of, I don't know, maybe it's before I came to Mitra, was just being with the Mogavamsa and just being infused with confidence of just, your troubles, you'll be okay. You will be okay. What you need is the tent pegs of the Sangha. You need to knock them into the ground. You need as many as possible to hold you well, hold you safe, and you'll flourish. And I just thought, so moved by what Mogavamsa said that day, that night. I think it's probably on the evening of a Sangha night. Probably we were sitting in the Red Shrine Room on the floor, and he was holding my hand in a way that he can do. And you just felt, I'm going to be okay. And I think the other rejoicing it's really been incredibly strong and precious for me was on the evening of he who was Peter, me, back in July, and back in June, and we were having the send off in the tent, and so Bodhinaga to my left and Vadanya was to my right. I was sort of looking up at the screen to Vadanya, but I should probably look at the camera to look directly at Vadanya, because when he rejoiced in me, I just felt completely held, not just by Vadanya's sort of deep love, and it was this strong love. I was met by Vadanya's eyes. It's a very strong thing to be met by. And but I just felt the whole of the Sangha behind me as well. I felt he was sort of channeling this energy of all of the Sangha, that you would be well, you would flourish, and that this was, this great thing, to mark this great, incredible occasion for me. And that kind of just had this sort of vivid connection, both with the Sangha here, but also the Sangha through the ages. And I think just the importance of the remembrance garden in that, and all of the work that's kind of led to that coming into being as such an important place. So finally, I just want to say, I just want to rejoice in delight. Rejoice with delight in everyone here. Rejoice with delight in the Sheffield Sangha, and that how Sangha is the essential part of our going for refuge. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so thank you to Pretti, thank you to Dayaloka, thank you to me for speaking this evening. Thank you. And yeah, I hope you got a flavour, if you didn't already, of how wonderful rejoicing can be, that, how uplifting it can be, what a important, the important state it is, and why it comes at this stage of the puja. And so we've already, I was going to say, let's do it again. Let's have another round of applause for Pretti and for Dayaloka and for me. And then what we would like you to do in our discussion groups is this is rejoice. So